What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday edition. As always, get social with us at Rich Q on Q, YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. We got a lot of content, and we always enjoy our good friend Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, jumping on board as it felt like it was just August. We were previewing the season, and all of a sudden, now we are down to the Final Four. We know one thing's for certain. My Giants are not part of that equation, as they got thumped by the Philadelphia Eagles on Saturday night. My friend, how are you?
Doing good. I thought the game would be closer, and it was just unfortunate. They real stinker they put up there. It was a tough watch, but like we had talked about before, it was something for them just to get there, and they were ascending. I just think this Eagles team they may be better than I thought and everybody else thought. They just totally dominated that game.
Yeah, and conversely, the Giants might not be or as good as we thought, right? Maybe a little smoke and mirrors. I mean, listen, they're void of talent. That's for sure. The GM and the head coach spoke yesterday on the futures of one Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and I believe ultimately they will figure out a way to re-sign Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones is a 25 to 27, maybe $28 million player a year, but the Giants still have to go out. They have to give him weapons. They still have to fix the offensive line that is still dead ranked over the last 3 years in the NFL, 30, 31, 29, still issues, even though you think you have some good bookends with Neal and the All-Pro Andrew Thomas. And then there's Saquon Barkley. So let's speak to Daniel Jones for a moment. Ultimately, Joe Schoen said, we want to move forward with Daniel Jones, and everyone's getting all in a huff because Brian Daboll kind of raised his eyebrows right away. I don't care about that. That's all semantics and smoke and mirrors. The GM makes that decision. If you're Daniel Jones and you want to put yourself out there, you also have to realize if you go to another franchise that's a different head coach, different scheme, different animal, different offensive coordinator, I think it would behoove him to stay with the Giants. I think Daniel Jones can be that guy going forward with the Giants. I guess the numbers have to jive. What kind of scenario do you see? The going rate, a bridge contract, or a non-exclusive rights franchise tag?
Yeah, Q, what I'm hearing out there in terms of Daniel Jones is that they are going to re-sign him, and it probably will be to that, $27 to $30 million contract range. I don't think he'll get that Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray in an upwards type of money, that $40 million a year. I don't think he's going to get that amount. I think, you don't want to say he's going to give a hometown discount, but I think he wants to stay a Giant. He learned a lot of good things from Brian Daboll, and that offense was clicking. And you talk about Thomas and Neal, the two big tackles that they got from the SEC, and those two guys are going to keep getting better. And they're going to go into the draft and they're going to try to improve. Now, to piggyback off the question, Saquon, that may be another story, because I've heard he's already turned down. They gave him a pretty respectable offer around the midpoint of the season, and he wanted more. So that's going to be interesting there.
$12 million during the bye week. No one's really substantiating the reports. There's no way he's a $60 million running back. He's not the type of running back that Christian McCaffrey is. He's just not. If you tag him, then you're looking at 10.1 million. He already said he doesn't want to get tagged, but he also came out and said that he understands where he's at, especially coming off 2 injury-plagued seasons. Still had 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, catches the ball out of the backfield, has been making some plays. But I do go back, and this is where I will read into a little bit of the video. The film doesn't lie. That burst wasn't there Saturday night 2-3 years ago prior to that injury. He's probably breaking it for a long touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles. It was the type of run he had against Washington years ago. I also believe that running backs are a commodity, and you don't overvalue them, and you certainly don't overpay. The other point I wanted to make, and you tell me if I'm accurate with this, I think it hurt the Giants that they drafted Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones. They lump them together, top 5, top 6, top 7 draft picks in consecutive years when you think about it, because ultimately when you do that, who stays, who gets paid? And that's the problem they're running into. They've got to shed some money They'll get money back on the Galladay deal, but I think they might tag him. And if he walks, then I'm sure there's a team like Buffalo. I was reading reports that Denver would be interested in a player like Saquon. I would love to see him come back, but I understand the business side of it. But then I'll do you one better. You take him off the field, who's your weapon besides the quarterback?
Right, right. And when I look at this team, he is the engine that makes it go. But unfortunately, too, like you were alluding to, teams are not going to pay running backs any longer. Whether taken in top 5 like Saquon was or not. You can always find somebody in the later rounds, even free agency, that can kind of in the new NFL kind of get those yards for you, and you won't be paying that premium dollar that just costs so much. And I'm sure we'll get to Dallas Cowboys in a minute, but next year, Ezekiel Elliott has a $16.7 million cap hit coming. And, ever since Todd Gurley got paid by the LA Rams, the market's been kind of set for these running backs, and they've all underperformed. And when you talk to front office types, they're all saying the same thing. I'm not going to pay that type of money any longer for a running back. So I do agree with you that they will probably go the route to franchise him just so they can kind of control the narrative, whether it's re-signing him to that deal around $10 to $11 million, or using that as trade bait and sending him somewhere else. So there is going to be a market for him, but definitely, I know a lot of Giants fans I talked to want him back on the team.
So the Eagles get to win 38-7. Once that game's 7-0, they go for it on 4th and 8. I didn't like the play calling. 3rd and 3, then run the ball. You don't need the quarterback to drop back to pass. They couldn't do anything right. They couldn't tackle. The scheme was poor. They couldn't convert 3rd down. They gave up big chunks of yardage. Eagles ran all over the place. It was a bad outing. How much of that do you put on coaching, lack of talent, or perhaps just unprepared and overwhelmed by the moment?
Well, it's probably a little both. And to me, I think that the Eagles just were dominant and they had their number. They had the game plan to shut down Daniel Jones, and he's 15 to 27, 135 yards. He has the turnovers that we talked about. He avoided for so long. He had an interception and he had lost fumble. And I think the key thing was they had the pressure. Gannon's group, that defensive line, was getting after him. He was sacked 5 times, pressured other numerous times, and he just did not get comfortable back there. And then the Eagles, their MO is they try to get that big lead, and then they pin their ears back. And that's what they were able to do. And unfortunately, the Giants, they just could not get back in game. And it was a tough watch, but I think you're seeing an Eagles team that's really ascending at the right time.
Yeah, Giants offensive line, 31st in 2020, 30th in 2021, 30th in 2022. You lose that game 28-4. Maybe it's fool's gold and you think you're better than you really are and you want to run it back. I think long-term, that's probably the best thing to happen to them, was to get waxed like that. We saw it in 2005, when Carolina beat them and shut them out at home. They got to the playoffs the next year. 2007, they eventually won it. The Eagles, look, you didn't really see a whole lot because that game was so bad the other night. But if they can continue the trend of running the football effectively as they have and had against New York, against a San Francisco team in their front, then that puts a lot more pressure on San Francisco, where every possession starts to count that much more, because you can't get into a game where you're down 14-0 and have Purdy try to throw you back in the contest. I just think that would spell disaster for San Francisco. They grind it out against Dallas, right? That's what the good teams do. You figure out a way to grind it out. But when does the other shoe drop, right? 8 wins in a row, 9 wins in a row, 10, 11, 12. All right, here you go. Is the other shoe going to drop for Purdy and San Francisco come Sunday in Philadelphia?
Yeah, you got to wonder about that glass slippers are going to keep fitting. And the Eagles, it was their season, the destiny in 2017. You start wondering, is this the Niners year? Talk about 12 straight wins, and they're a team that looks in total control of all the offensive weapons I could talk about. They had Elijah Mitchell running wild in this game, and he helped Christian McCaffrey, who's battling a calf injury, and George Kittle did a nice job, and defensively, they didn't get those big sack numbers, but they were able to get just enough pressure on Dak Prescott for him to make some errors, and they had the right formula for them. So, it's going to be an interesting game, them coming to Philadelphia. I still always wonder about a rookie quarterback and has he seen enough of these scenarios and things that the defensive coordinator like Gannon is going to throw after him. So, the Eagles defense can be attacked in that middle layer, which their linebackers, Edwards and other guys are just not the best coverage guys. So maybe George Kittle can make some plays there. So he's going to be a big X factor in this game. But if you're talking about predictions, I really think right now that this is the Eagles' opportunity to win this game. And Jalen Hurts did a nice job in terms of he was only sacked one time. He ran it in key moments in the game, but he also was able to throw the football. And that offensive line, I think, is really for the Eagles, the huge heroes for this team. They're just dominant. 44 rushes, 268 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, averaging 6 yards a carry. And yes, Armstead and Bosa are going to be on the other side, and TJ Ward and the rest of those guys. But I think it's the Eagles game to lose right now.
Yeah, those are fair and valid points. But when I flip in and I look at the 49ers offense, granted, he's a young quarterback. You flush him out, you roll him out of the pocket. Sometimes the decision-making, the mindset, all of a sudden, I'm running to my left, I want to throw across the body. I'm running to my right, I want to spin around and throw. We get it. We can all live without that, because when you do that, you're going to make some really bad mistakes. Any head coach will tell you, never throw it across, never throw it across your body, right? So he's got a little Favreism in him with those tendencies. But you've got to worry about the tight end, 2 running backs, a slot receiver, wide receivers. San Francisco can throw a lot of different elements, a lot of different looks. They can be very creative. Debo can get his 25 touches. McCaffrey can get his. Ayuk, the wide receiver, the tight end, Kittle. I mean, they've got a substantial amount of weapons, man. And I think those looks, and I think you're going to see a ton of misdirections. You're going to see a ton of bubble screens. I think you'll have the quarterback rolling out one way, wide receivers, drag routes, slants going the other way. And I think San Francisco has got a big time puncher's chance in this one. I really do. I think they have a big time puncher's chance. And I'm not 100% sold on Jalen Hurts and Sirianni in a big spot, because what do we make of the other night when that game was over after one quarter, right? San Fran wants that grinded out type of game, tighten up a little bit. I don't know. At this moment, I haven't really leaned on one end of the fence or over it, but I think San Francisco's defense can carry them, and offensively, they're going to give the Philadelphia Eagles some looks that they haven't seen this year.
Yeah, and then you got a quarterback in Purdy who's not turning the football over. And we talked about Daniel Jones turning the ball over in key moments in that game against the Eagles, and Purdy didn't have any against the Cowboys. And turnovers, I'm stating obvious here, but that's going to cause a game to just the game plan to blow up. And he's done a great job. The last player taking the draft, a lot of scouting types I talked to did not see this coming from this young man, and he's really grown on the field. It's crazy. They're talking about maybe Jimmy G can start practicing, but they'd be nuts to put Jimmy G back out there and take Purdy, who seemed out of the lineup, who just has total control of this team. And you talk about Trent Williams, one of the best linemen in the game, and the rest of that offensive line. They do a good job too. So I'm expecting a close game. I know I live in the Philadelphia area. A lot of these guys are boasting. They've already talking about making trips to Arizona for the Super Bowl. It's not going to be that easy. I think it's going to be a close, tight game. And I think the Eagles will find a way, but it's going to be interesting one to watch.
The 49ers front too, defensively, that front 4, right? I mean, that offensive line, Lane Johnson gutted it out, man. Give them all the credit in the world. And Kelsey and those guys, it's a different animal than that Giants defense, right? It's a different animal. So the game might be well won in the trenches. So we'll certainly see how that one plays out. Then you had Jacksonville giving Kansas City all they had. Kansas City losing Patrick Mahomes, kind of a goofy injury, right? Because it seemed like him and Pollard suffered the same injury, and Pollard gets the worst of it. Mahomes high ankle sprain, very tricky. It's going to limit his mobility. We understand that, but now you go up against a Cincinnati squad that feels pretty damn good about themselves going on the road and not just beating Buffalo, a team that I would say 95% of the betting population and 95% of the national pundits and the talking heads predicted to not only get to the Super Bowl, but win it. So Cincinnati's not even playing with house money. They actually believe now they can go on the road and beat Kansas City.
No doubt about it. And we talked about it earlier in the year when they went to Kansas City and won, or was a game in Cincinnati? I'm not sure. But Joe Burrow is 3-0 versus Patrick Mahomes. So he has his number, so this is a game I've been going back and forth on. And with that Mahomes injury, that's going to be a huge thing in this particular matchup. And they're banged up as well. The Bengals on their front line, they don't have Kappa. They lost Lyle Collins to a season-ending ACL injury, and then Jonah Williams hurts his knee as well earlier. But that did not seem to phase them one bit in the game. We'll go back to the Buffalo game where they were in total control. Buffalo, as the host, looked like they were visitors. The Bengals went out there. They had the right game plan. They were driving the football with quick slant-type passes, and Jamar Chase is just incredible. He's a game breaker. He's a guy that's a new wide receiver, and he's going to be so tough to guard. We know Kansas City and Spagnuolo's group, yes, they get some pressure on the quarterback, but they do allow a lot of big plays, and I expect Jamar Chase to have a big game. Now, can Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey, his number one weapon, can they match them? So it's going to be an interesting battle. Right now, I'd have to. I'm leaning towards the Bengals because Joe Burrow looks in total control. And if we were picking an MVP right now instead of regular season, it would be Joe Burrow.
They were 4-4 after they lost to Cleveland 32-13. They've been on a run where they haven't lost since, and that includes the win against Baltimore, and then on the road against Buffalo. They beat Kansas City in that stretch 27-24. Burrow was close to 300 yards, and they've been able to run the football against Kansas City. I know where that line sits, 2.5. I love Cincinnati last week. I said it on BYP. I loved them on the money line. I don't understand the play calling and the offensive philosophy of Buffalo in the snow, where you're going to have your quarterback drop back to pass 42 times and not try to run the ball. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. Is Buffalo a broken team? We'll get to Cincinnati again, but is Buffalo a broken team? Like, you see the play calling. When we spoke, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that you can start to see the cracks leaking a little bit of oil. Miami could have easily won that game if the head coach was paying attention, if they didn't have all those play clock violations and doing it with pretty much a third string quarterback in Thompson. Then you saw this weekend, again, at home, your conditions, snow, run the football. You're dropping back to pass 40 something odd times. Then you have Diggs barking on the sidelines to Josh Allen. And quite frankly, I don't mind the competitiveness, but you're showing up your quarterback. You've been targeted 47 times, I believe it was, in 2 games. Like, that's not on the quarterback. So where are you at right now with Buffalo? And do you think this franchise is broken?
Well, they have a lot of work to do. The Sean McDermott, obviously a defensive guy, and offensively lose Daboll, and that was a huge loss for them. No disrespect to Ken Dorsey, who's their offensive coordinator now, but they just were not dialing up the right plays out there, as you were saying. Again, Josh Allen was their leading rusher, 8 rushes for 26 yards, and he's their main threat. They have to find, whether it's Cook, who they drafted, or somebody else, they have to find somebody that's able to run the football and so they can play complementary football and just not rely on him so much. He was banged up all season with that elbow, and he never cried about it, but it just was affecting him. And you're right, they did not have the right game plan for the conditions, and they have to find, some balance. So it was a bad loss for them. Obviously losing Poyer on that friendly fire play where he got hit and he had to leave the game, that hurt them a lot because their defense has been banged up as well.
Yeah, and I misspoke. I'm sorry, because that was an outlandish number. I was talking about how many times he dropped back to pass. He targeted Diggs 9 times in Miami, against Miami, 9 times for 114. He targeted him 10 times the other day. He caught 4 balls for 35 yards. That's not on the quarterback. That's on the play calling. Like, that's my gripe. Like, that's on the play calling. And when you got a quarterback, a wide receiver that's barking at the quarterback right now, and all of a sudden the quarterback's under duress and under fire, that to me is a bad mix. And, you go on social media and you hear some of these guys sit there and say, well, maybe Josh Allen's not as good as we think he is. Josh Allen is a very good quarterback, but I think there's something to be said with Brian Dable now with Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones has cut down his turnovers. And you look at Brian Dable's Dable is not in Buffalo anymore with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen has had some horrible red zone picks this season and into the playoffs. So I do think there's something to be said about his absence in Buffalo.
Yeah, and he, Josh Allen, another guy that has that gunslinger mentality, and he does have to learn to not try to take the big chunk in the red zone, in particular. He's had a lot of interceptions in the end zone this season that have kind of cost them some key games, and maybe he will learn from these mistakes. And this is a good young team now. It's up. They made the point to my own. I was listening to said that McDermott's been there 6 years, so I don't think he's going anywhere. They're going to build a new stadium up there for this team, and ironically, it's going to be a dome, which they're built more for a dome than outside. But they have a lot of work to do, but they still should be pretty strong in that division. But the Jets are definitely trying to build something to catch them.
I like Cincinnati in this spot on the road. I think offensive firepower, and then you have the X factor is going to be the health of Patrick Mahomes. You limit his mobility. What does he do best? He scrambles around. He buys times. He rolls around. I think Cincinnati feels they're very slighted. They're extremely disrespected. But I like them on Sunday. You mentioned, with the Jets. I want to get a couple quarterback thoughts.
Sure.
Are the Dallas Cowboys stuck with Dak Prescott now? Because I feel as though at this moment, Dak Prescott is just he's an okay quarterback. He came back, had a monster year after the injury when he only played in 5 games 2 years ago, threw the ball well last year. But it seems in big spots, the mistakes that you shouldn't be getting from a 6, 7, 8 year vet. And I look at the Cowboys. I think they peaked. Right? You got the head coach that you're not sold on. You got the quarterback that seems to just revert back to inconsistent, mistake prone. And I think this is where you're at with the Dallas Cowboys. Listen, the Eagles offensive line getting a little older. Washington still doesn't have a quarterback, and the Giants are kind of trending up. I think Dallas takes a substantial step back.
Yeah, they have that cyclical cycle over and over again where they are high and then they have like a 2-year lull. So
right.
It could be coming. I think a huge thing, Q, is their owner, Jerry Jones, is their listed general manager. And he has to, give up those duties and have a football person build this team. We talk about, Howie Roseman and what he's done for the Eagles. And you have to have that architect type of person there. And, to overrule the owner, because the owner too many times, they're not on a day-to-day and understand football operations. Yes, they're signing the checks and everything, but he needs to give up those duties. And getting back to Dak, he made some huge mistakes in terms of who he's decided to pay. Yes, Dak, he wanted him. He gave him $40 million plus, and that a season. That's just way too much for him. And I do agree with you that, yes, he's a top half of the NFL quarterback, but he's not a championship level guy. And he showed it once again, 0-3 in the divisional round. Dallas, I think for the 7th straight time, they lost in the divisional round. And he's just not making that difference when it's needed most. And those interceptions, they were avoidable. I went back and looked at the tape on all 24 and he's eyeballing the guy right away. And it was easy to jump those routes and pick him off. So, made a lot of mistakes and all my Philadelphia Eagles fans are having a lot of fun because, they hate the Cowboys and there's social media memes everywhere about how Dak is trash and everything. And, he's got a lot of work to do. And then McCarthy, he's got to be feeling the heat of a Sean Payton. But with a Sean Payton, he's going to want $20 to $25 million to come somewhere. And he's also going to come with a draft pick price.
Yep.
Does Dallas want to pay that? And then would he sit there and listen to Jerry Jones? Because that was a big thing with Parcells.
No, he won't. And that's what happens. Same thing with Jimmy Johnson. You have the clash of personalities. It's all about egos, checkbook aside. Mike McCarthy, I think, is an average head coach. I really do. And I think right now, Dak Prescott didn't change the narrative because in the biggest spot, you still got to make the play. And that's the problem. to make the play. You can't have the Odell syndrome where you're just going to force the ball into Beckham because he's your weapon. Eli did it late in his career. Brady was doing it with Evans. Now you're seeing a Dak do it with CeeDee Lamb. It doesn't fly. It just does not fly. And to your point with Sean Payton, what has Sean Payton really done in his career? Like, honestly, like, think about this. Well, why do we hold Sean Payton with such high regard and esteem like Gruden? Okay, you won a Super Bowl. I can name a lot of head coaches who won one Super Bowl. But other than that, why? I don't know. I feel as though we look at Payton like everyone started to look at Gruden after all these years. And now you're going to open up the checkbook, give him 10 years, $200 million. And yes, to your point, you also got to fork over, draft picks.
Yeah, because he signed in New Orleans for like
that's right.
2 years, I believe.
That's right. That's right. So I think Dallas is shit out of luck, to be honest. I think Dallas is in purgatory right now. One of my very good friends is a diehard Dallas fan, and he said, I don't even get mad anymore because I've seen this movie. It is what it is. And Romo was 2-4 in his career in the playoffs. Dak Prescott is 2-4. They've had horrible losses. Everyone's waiting for that last play to unfold, and that's the play you give us. They weren't going to win the game, but my point is, this franchise is just rudderless. And if you look around the NFC East, they're going to get better, those other teams. Washington is going to get better. The Giants are going to get better. The Eagles have shown they've gotten better, even though they're getting older in certain positions. I think Dallas is in trouble. You mentioned Dak. I want to get to two more quarterbacks.
Sure.
Aaron Rodgers. So hopefully it doesn't stretch out with the drama crap for the next month or two. But is there a scenario where you can see Aaron Rodgers go into the Jets or the Raiders, or can you see a scenario where Aaron Rodgers goes back to Green Bay, but he even said by his own accord, the money that he's probably going to come back at because of where we're at financially in the NFL with some of these constraints, it's not going to be that $50-60 million. I mean, ultimately, where do you believe Aaron Rodgers will be under center at the start of next season?
Yeah, Q, I think he's going to look around, and I was just talking to somebody up in the New York area, and yes, the Jets are going to make a run at him, but it's going to take, maybe 2 first rounders or more to get him. So, and that's a high price to pay for a young team. And Rodgers is going to walk around, but as you were saying, he's got that huge contract value on him, which makes him very difficult to trade. I think in the end, he will come back to the Packers and they make him sweat it out. It'd be best for him to kind of come back to all the off-season stuff, but in the past couple of years, he really hasn't. He's kind of stayed away. And if he wants to go deeper in the playoffs, he's going to have to make that commitment to the team like they've made to him. So I think he comes back and him and LaFleur try to run it back. But, he is definitely on the downside of his career, and they need to get some more weapons around him.
Well, he raved about the Jets' weapons, but you mentioned downside of his career. Would you be willing to sell your soul and give up 2 first-round draft picks?
Yeah, that's Woody Johnson, who's the owner of the Jets. Is he going to do it? He's going to think about it because I think he'd like to make a big splash. Would Rodgers even want to come to New York, because he has basically no trade with that big contract? He'd have to work out a restructuring on the other side. So, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. I think in the end, he'll end up in Green Bay. Now, you talk about the Raiders. They're going to move on from Carr. So where's Carr going to land? It's going to be an interesting thing. And I still think if Tom Brady wants to play, I'm still hearing that the Raiders may be his first choice. So it's going to be very interesting this offseason.
So just to close out the Rodgers conversation, if the Jets give up 2 draft picks, ready-made defense and their weapons, this will remind me of when they turned around and they made the move for Brett Favre and they started at 8-3, and then his arm just went shot and he had the shoulder issues. He had the big game in I think early on in the season, 4 touchdown passes. They were 8-3. I think they beat Tennessee, and then they finished maybe like 8-8. And Favre was no more. Like, if you're going to make a run at it, and you're going to make a run out of it with a 39-year-old quarterback, I understand all that. A Hall of Famer, an all-time great. You better be sure you look under the hood. That's all I'm saying, because he has not played particularly well this season. And there were moments, once again, he showed he's not that clutch quarterback. And that's all I'm saying. Now the Jets have the weapons and they have the defense, and they'll get the running back coming off from injury. It'll be fascinating because they did the same thing with Brett Favre. They
Yeah.
sold their soul for Brett Favre and it didn't work out.
Well, yeah, and it's the same franchise, which is very ironic, and it's going to be interesting. But they really need to look at that tape from, Joe Douglas, the general manager with the Jets. They need to look at that Lions tape because, as you were talking about, he ended that game on some bad throws, particularly that last interception, and he's just not throwing the ball like he used to. So he would have to lean on the running game there, and they had some injuries at the running back position. So very interesting thing on watch, but I think that price tag is just going to be too high, and he's going to end up back with the Packers.
I think Tom Brady doesn't return to Tampa Bay. I think Tom Brady will probably be courted by Miami if Miami's not entirely sold on the health of Tua going forward. And let's not forget, that kid was, you can make a case, MVP of the NFL 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season. That's how well he was playing. And then he was out. You saw Miami take a step backwards, a major drop offensively. But the Raiders and Brady, it just seems to be too good of a fit. So let me throw you the curveball.
Sure.
You've got the Texans out there, and wouldn't that be something if Derek Carr goes to the Texans and tries to do something his brother wasn't able to do, win? And albeit, to be fair, their offensive line stunk when he was drafted years ago. You've got Washington that needs a quarterback. I think they make a run at Lamar Jackson. We mentioned the Jets and maybe Rodgers and Green Bay. How about this scenario? How about San Francisco? You've got Trey Lance. So now that kid's stuck in no man's land. They still have Garoppolo. They're going to try to move him. You've got Purdy. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe you don't. And then there's Brady. And what team did Brady grow up idolizing? The San Francisco 49ers. Joe Montana was his guy. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there because I can see a scenario where you go to a team that's desperate for a young quarterback. They trade Lance. They get some capital back. You trade Jimmy G, so you wipe that off the slate. You've got Purdy just in case. You already know what he can do. Why not try to make a move for a Tom Brady, who is a free agent, which means you don't have to give anything up for him. You just have to have money. And Brady is a type of player. We saw it all those years in New England. He would actually work with them, team-friendly type of deals.
Yeah, and he's going to go somewhere where he's going to be protected. And that was the biggest problem this year. He had Jensen finally for his playoff game, but that offensive line was very beat up. He had Ali Marpet retire, and they just were not the same up front. And he does not want to be hit, and who can blame him at 45 years old? So he is going to go to a team that has a really strong offensive line and a game plan that's going to utilize play action and get the ball out of his hands quickly, and he's not going to get hit. So, the Niners, we got to wait and see. If they win the Super Bowl with Purdy or even get to the Super Bowl with Purdy, I just think they'll probably stick with that young guy and then go from there. But Tom Brady is going to have that type of tour that we talked about. Remember Reggie White doing that so many years ago, where he was going all these different places. I think Brady is definitely going to stay in the game, become a free agent, and he's going to look around for the best situation for himself.
And he's 45 and Rodgers is 39. And you're right. When you don't want to get hit, right? And that's why he's thrown off his back foot. He was rushing some passes. I don't believe he goes out, and I'm going to tell you why. When he threw that pick six, his last pass in New England against, I think it was the Titans, the ego again. You're not going out like that. He's not going out with a losing record and then to get waxed in a playoff game. It's just not. I don't know, man. I think we're going to wait to see what kind of shoes start to drop and fall with some of these quarterbacks, because it is the changing of the guard in the NFL. You've got these young gunslingers in Herbert, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it's a young man's game now. These guys that we're talking about, you're not going to see the Floccos next year. You're not going to see the Matt Ryans. You might not even see the Carson Wentzes you'll see the Rodgers, you'll probably see the Brady, but other than that, it's a young man's game.
Yeah, and these decision makers, they're going with the younger guys. They realize the NFL is a game where you have to be able to get away from pressure. And a lot of these guys, those dual threat guys like a Josh Allen and a Hurts, they can move away from pressure and make plays, whether it's running down the field or throwing the ball outside the pocket. So, these younger guys are kind of taking over the game, and you got to wonder, do these GMs, do they want an older guy to build their team around? And what's the cost? Like the price tag that Rodgers is carrying right now is just way too high. I think Brady definitely, as you're saying, he would agree to come in probably the $30-35 million range and leave some on the table to help the team out. So going to be real interesting, but we've seen the last couple of years, a quarterback carousel will turn around, and there's going to be probably 5-6 guys in new places next season.
Yeah. Let me get you out on this in the category of what the F. Have you seen, heard, or read this Damar Hamlin conspiracy theory with the body double? So there's conspiracy theory going on. Why was he escorted? Why haven't we seen his face? Why did it look like a silhouette during the game? And everyone's throwing out. This is the world we live in, my friend. It is a sick world. They're throwing out theories where it's a body double. The NFL is in cahoots because he's really not alive because he didn't take the vaccine, all this crap, all this stuff, the CBS fee. This is the world where and I'm a conspiracy guy. I dive into that like anyone else. But even for me, this is like pure sickness.
Yeah,
like I don't, what are we doing? Like why am I even bringing this up? That's how goofy and sick it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's so many trolls out there. That's what I like to call them. Whether it's in the Twitter sphere or any other social media, they're just throwing things out there. Obviously, it's not a true reported story, and it's just unfortunate they would throw something out there. This young man almost died on the field, and it was a great rallying thing for the NFL and his team and his community. Everybody supporting him, and it's just sad that they would just go that direction with it. Obviously, him being there, you thought would help pump the team up, but their season came to an end, but his story is not going to end. So, young man has overcome a lot, and he's just going to keep moving forward.
Exactly. Like, let sleeping dogs lie. Like, leave him alone. Like, it's,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Some people on Twitter, they just got punchable avatars. He is our guy, Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider. All right, brother. We got 3 games left. It's a little depressing.
Yeah, it's going too quick this season, but we're going to enjoy these last couple of games. I'm going to go. You can put me on record: Eagles and the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and we'll just see how it goes from there. But hopefully, have some good, enjoyable games and some close games. I don't want those blowouts, man.
Yeah, I might have to go back and just watch the Giants versus Minnesota this week because I'm not watching the other game. We will certainly talk to you next Tuesday. I always appreciate you jumping on BYP.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
All right, you got it, brother. Be well.